for the Local Leadership Creating Resilient Communities event. And I'm pleased to welcome you all today to the U.S. Center. We're very happy to have you join us for one of our few remaining events here at the U.S. Center. So we've been pleased to have you all week, and I notice a lot of familiar faces, so thank you so much for joining us. Also, welcome to our online audience. We know you're tuning in from all over the world, so we hope you will tweet hashtag AskUSCenter in the Q&A portion of our event, where we'll have a really good discussion with these local leaders up here. So to begin, I am pleased to introduce Nancy Sutley, who is the chair of the White House Council on Environmental Quality. And in that position, she serves as the principal environmental policy advisor for the president. Prior to her appointment, she was the deputy mayor for energy and environment for the city of Los Angeles, so a local leader herself. And she has also worked with the governor of California office and where she managed state and federal regulations, legislative affairs, finances, press relations, pretty much everything. So with that, I'd like to welcome Chair Sutley to the mic.
Thanks very much, and welcome. Welcome to everyone, and it's really great to be here and to join this terrific group here, talk about the importance of building resilient communities and leadership that we're seeing from communities across the United States. And it's great to see not just the panel up here, but know that there's a lot of participation and discussion from local officials and state and provincial officials in the U.S. and around the world here at this conference. And it's really important for us in the national government to learn from experience at the local level and provide a platform for an international solution and for local communities to contribute to that solution, because the impacts of climate change are being felt at the local level, shouldered by communities, by families and businesses across the United States and across the world. We know that as the climate changes, we can expect extreme weather events like floods and storms, wildfires and heat waves to grow more frequent and more severe, as well as the economic costs and the health impacts associated with them. In 2012, in the United States, the cost of weather disasters exceeded $110 billion. Beyond extreme weather events, carbon pollution is also threatening the health of our families, especially our most vulnerable populations, including children and the elderly. The warmer temperatures that are spurred by carbon pollution can worsen smog and soot and pollen levels, triggering more asthma attacks. And there are other health risks too, like prolonged allergy seasons, increased heat-related illnesses and deaths, and changes in the life cycle and distribution of insects that transmit disease. So in June, President Obama created the Climate Action Plan, which has three focuses: reducing carbon pollution, preparing the United States for the climate impacts we can't avoid, and working with our international partners to lead global efforts to combat climate change. We know we have to work very aggressively to curb the carbon emissions that are driving climate change so we can avoid the worst impacts on our families and our businesses. So we're setting new rules to limit carbon pollution from power plants, setting new targets for doubling renewable energy production in our country, and setting new efficiency standards for consumer products like dishwashers and refrigerators that will save enough electricity to power tens of thousands of homes. And ultimately, these efforts will be implemented by local officials in the U.S. And even as we take these steps to reduce carbon pollution and to move our economy towards cleaner and more efficient forms of energy, we also have to improve our ability to address the effects of climate change that are already being felt. This idea of preparedness and resiliency, and that it should be built into everything that we do, is a key pillar of President Obama's Climate Action Plan. Disasters like Hurricane Sandy, which devastated East Coast communities last year and cost the U.S. tens of billions of dollars, reinforce the importance of making smart investments to improve resilience and protect our families, businesses, and communities from extreme weather and other impacts of climate change. The President's plan focuses on partnering with U.S. states, cities, and businesses to prepare for these impacts by investing in stronger and safer infrastructure, by protecting critical sectors of our economy and our natural resources, and putting in place plans and resources for the future. For example, we're directing federal agencies to make sure that any new road, building, or project that's funded with taxpayer dollars is built to withstand the increased flood risks from extreme weather and sea level rise. The investments we are making now will need to last for decades, whether they're rebuilding a bridge in New York or building a new water treatment plant in California. It's smarter to build them to be able to function in future climate conditions. We're also taking a look at how climate change will affect key sectors so we can better prepare ourselves. For example, the U.S. Department of Energy just released a report that outlines what needs to be done to protect our electric grid and make sure we're not plagued by an increasing number of power outages. And we're working to make sure that we have the best data and science on how climate change is going to affect different areas of the United States so we can respond to the needs of local decision makers for information and equip them with the best data and tools to protect their communities. To ensure that the U.S. government's work responds to the needs of communities on the ground, earlier this month, President Obama created a task force of governors, mayors, and tribal leaders and other elected officials to advise the U.S. government on additional steps we can take to help communities strengthen their resilience to climate change. We know that many U.S. local officials are leaders when it comes to taking actions to prepare for climate change, including officials in California and our two mayors who are here with us today. More than 600 U.S. cities have sustainability programs, and many of them are already implementing resilience plans addressing threats such as sea level rise, extreme heat, increased precipitation, and other impacts. The members of our state and local tribal leaders task force will bring valuable experience and expertise to the table as the U.S. government designs future actions. For example, and you'll hear from him in a moment, Mayor Hartwell is a founding member of the Climate Resilient Communities Program, which helps local governments prepare for climate change. And under his leadership, the city of Grand Rapids, Michigan, has reduced its greenhouse gas emissions by 10,000 metric tons, reduced the city's electricity use by 100,000 megawatt hours, and increased energy efficiency in city facilities by 10%. This is just one example of the kind of local work happening across the United States to both curb carbon pollution and increase community resilience. And we believe that the U.S. federal government has an important role to play in supporting these efforts. In the wake of Hurricane Sandy, we saw how essential it is for federal agencies to be good partners with communities in building resilience during disaster recovery. It showed how the links between our economy, our infrastructure, and our communities can lead to unexpected consequences. For example, there were severe fuel shortages around New York City, even in gas stations that had full supplies of gasoline, but had no electricity to pump their gas. And we know that there are examples from Hurricane Sandy where building smarter led to less vulnerability. At the campus of New York University in downtown Manhattan, electric cogeneration kept the lights on when the overall grid failed. And in some portions of the East Coast, a focus on protecting and restoring natural areas like wetlands and dunes provided natural barriers that helped the communities behind them fare much better than others. And we also learned a lot about what things that we should avoid. For example, a number of hospitals in New York City had their electricity generators in the basement, and that made them useless in the flood and storm surge, and left critical facilities without backup power when they needed it the most. So leaders in the Sandy-affected region and in the federal government are focusing on how we build back better so that these cities and these states can be more resilient. We don't want to recreate the vulnerabilities that led to all of that devastation. We want to rebuild communities that will be safe and strong today and also in the future. The President created a Hurricane Sandy Rebuilding Task Force which made recommendations that are now being implemented to help the region build stronger than before, and piloting a number of approaches in the Sandy affected region. We had an event here earlier in the week where the Department of Housing and Urban Development shared some of the solutions that they put in place based on those task force recommendations, including a regional rebuild by design competition to generate innovative solutions to enhance resilience, guidance to all grantees requiring them to look at climate-related risk in their recovery plans in order to qualify for assistance in rebuilding critical infrastructure. In the transportation sector, the U.S.'s government is dedicating nearly $6 billion to the area's most impacted transit agencies, in part to make transit systems more resilient to future disasters. And the U.S. Department of the Interior has launched a $100 million competitive grant program to foster partnerships and promote resilient natural systems and enhance green spaces and wildlife habitat near urban populations to help build coastal resilience. So this has really been an interesting process. We've also looked at opportunities to provide tangible information and guidance to local decision makers as they recovered from Hurricane Sandy, including minimum flood risk reduction standards for all projects receiving federal funds that look at the increased risk due to sea level rise and other factors. And the federal government has also provided an interactive sea level rise tool that allows local planners to see how their 100-year floodplain is likely to change with sea level rise. So we believe that working together we can take these lessons learned and lessons learned from other extreme weather events and other impacts of climate change and use them to make our nations safer and stronger. And we're really depending on the ideas, on the input, and hearing directly from local leadership about how we can make this happen. And that's what this event is about today. So thank you all for being here, and I look forward to the discussion. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair Sutley. Now I'd like to introduce our panelists to all of you, and I encourage you too, if you want to take part in the conversation, feel free to scoot up and fill in the front row seats. That way you can be a little more interactive and we can hear your questions and comments a little better. Okay, first I'd like to introduce to you Michael McCormick, who works for the California Governor's Office of Planning and Research, and he's working on how state efforts on climate change are implemented at the local and regional levels, and he's going to be the moderator of today's discussion. I'd then like to introduce Des Moines, Iowa Mayor Frank County, who's spent much of his time in leadership roles at the national and international stages representing issues that he's most passionate about: local control, green initiatives, jobs, and the economy. Most recently, he was selected to serve on President Obama's task force, as Chair Sutley mentioned, and he works extensively with the U.S. Conference of Mayors, Local Government for Sustainability, with ICLEI, and many others. I'd also like to introduce to you Mayor George Hartwell, who's the mayor of Grand Rapids, Michigan. During his tenure, city government has implemented a variety of environmental measures, including purchase of renewable resource energy, use of alternative fuels in city vehicles, continued attention to water quality in the Grand River, and widespread implementation of energy conservation measures. And in January of 2007, the UN recognized Grand Rapids as a regional center of expertise in education for sustainable development. Mayor Hartwell is also a member of President Obama's task force. Finally, I'd like to introduce you to Brian Holland, who is the Director of Climate Programs for ICLEI USA, and he oversees the development of ICLEI USA's climate programs. Since 2009, he's been working on these issues with ICLEI, and he serves as a campaign manager for the Resilient Communities for America campaign, rallying the leadership of hundreds of local officials in the U.S., creating stronger and more prepared communities, and he's also a lead author in the upcoming National Climate Assessment for the U.S. Okay, take it away.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here today on Cities Day. ICLEI and the state of California decided to come together to help create this event, and we're very happy to have two esteemed mayors here from the U.S. to represent the local government voice. I'm going to talk a little bit about how the state of California has been interfacing with our local and regional partners. It's a really important part of our plan for both reducing emissions and having a more resilient state. So we have a structure within the state. It's basically 4 parts. One, the first one is more of an overarching policy and goal program. It's called the Environmental Goals and Policy Report. If you're interested, it's in public review right now, and you can Google the name and find it. We invite comments on it. It's basically the overall plan for how the state is going to grow to 50 million people by 2050. Right now we have 38 million people in the state. We have significant issues that we will be facing with 12 million additional people from both infrastructure and environmental considerations. We also have agricultural issues and land use concerns that we need to address as we grow as a community. We have three basic programs underneath that address climate change. One is the research program, so a comprehensive research approach to cover both the impacts of climate change and how we can accommodate changes in our environment, reduce our emissions, and become more resilient. We have the AB 32 scoping plan, which was passed in 2006, but is now currently in the AB 32 scoping plan is being revised right now to respond to how the changes in our programs, how we get to 2020 more effectively, and really setting a path past 2020. We have long-term greenhouse gas emissions reduction goals for 2050 of 80% below 1990 levels by 2050. We're well on our way to meet our target by 2020, which is 15% or 15% below 2005, which was the estimate, or back to 1990 levels. We're very excited to be able to say that we're on track to meet that target. But even if we do significantly reduce our emissions, we're also going to be affected by the impacts of climate change. We're already feeling the effects in California, and as a result of that, in 2009, the first California adaptation strategy was established, which set up a number of different priorities. We have a visualization system called CalAdapt, which allows you to visualize the impacts of climate change within California. And we also have the Adaptation Planning Guide, which is a resource for local governments that would like to plan for the impacts of climate change. Right now we're currently doing an update to that. It's called the Safeguarding California Plan, and it'll be out in public review in the next month. So if you're interested in that, please keep an eye on the California Climate Change portal, which is climatechange.ca.gov. So under the resilience framework, since that's the primary topic of today's conversation, we have a number of different levels of government that we need to work with, and I think this has been pretty clear if you've been attending other Cities Day events today. We have the federal level that we interface on a regular basis with, and we're very excited to be here at the U.S. Center today and have Chair Sutley introduce the panel. Governor Brown has also been selected for the President's Task Force, so we're also excited to be participating in that national dialogue. We have the state level work, which is mainly focused on agencies and how we manage our resources as a state. But we also have very strong local control of land use. So we as a state will never achieve our longer term goals, which requires true transformation of markets and how we live as society in California. We're not going to achieve those goals unless we also engage our regional and local partners. So they're an essential part of the conversation. Over the past year and a half, we've had pretty significant efforts within the San Diego region, the Los Angeles region, the Sacramento region, and the San Francisco Bay Area, all working on adaptation and resiliency. One of the things that we've done over the past year to help bring those conversations together and work with the regions more effectively is develop a multi-regional collaborative. It's called the Alliance of Regional Collaboratives for Climate Adaptation. And it's really, we've looked around the nation There's a couple of other collaboratives that work similarly, but it's truly its own structure. And it's almost a new paradigm in how we talk about regionalization, how we talk about the impacts of climate change, and it's something we're actively working towards. We also have about 90 climate action plans in the state. At the local government level, we have about a little over 500 local government jurisdictions. 90 of them have climate action plans. A number are also being in process right now. And there's other goals, plans, and policies in the works that aren't specifically climate action plans. So we've done a lot of work in California to address climate change, both on the greenhouse gas side and on the resilience and adaptation side. But connecting the dots between the various levels of government is really the next phase for efficiency as we move forward to 2050. And I think that's pretty much the point I wanted to highlight here. And I'm looking forward to the conversation with all of you. So I'm going to pass it over to Mayor Cowley, and and you can take it from there.
All right, thank you. It's a pleasure for me to be here, and actually have attended this COP. I was in Copenhagen, and we did a similar event there, and I will tell you that it's inspiring to see local governments from around the world aspire to do the best that they can to preserve our environment, to preserve opportunities, create opportunities for future generations, and know that local government representatives like Mayor Hartwell and I, we're sort of part of a coalition of mayors, and quite frankly, mayors across this country. Every single day, we do the work. So if there's a levee that needs to be fixed, a levee that needs to be built, a new system needs to be put in City Hall to help reduce our not only our greenhouse gas emissions, but the efficiency of our city, and reduce our costs. We try to do all those things. And as we look at the opportunities that have happened, and certainly with this administration, we've had more than we have in a long time. The city of Des Moines has participated in regional sustainability planning grants. We were one of the first 10 cities to get one of those opportunities, and work with our neighbors in the suburbs to try to think about what it looks like today and what it should look like 20, 30 years from today, and how we should design to be more resilient, more efficient, more sustainable. Secondly, we also participated in a program that's called Greening of America's Capitals. It was an EPA program that the city of Des Moines just completed and got the initial recommendations from EPA. And so we're working on those kinds of things. What is that? It's about green infrastructure. It's how about changing the way we think about what we do in our case with water that's falling out of the sky. And, you know, is it the best idea to hard surface everything and stick it in a pipe and send it to a river, which adversely affects those downstream from us? Unfortunately, that's what's happening across the country, and often we ought to be dealing with the rain where it falls. So this looks at how we handle those kinds of issues and put it in everything from bioswales to rain gardens to permeable pavement, and how do we treat water so that we contain it on site. And as many people in the past have said, the best place to deal with water is where it falls. Don't send it downstream to somebody else. Certainly not only are there flood issues that are related to all this around the state of Iowa, which is an agricultural state, but certainly there's water quality issues and freshwater issues. So we have to deal with those kinds of things, and mayors and water departments and our directors are all working day after day to try to make that happen. Another one of our programs that the city of Des Moines is currently working on is STAR Communities. It's a program that looks at 8 or 9 different categories and all kinds of variables, and you end up with, in each one of those categories, you ended up with about 81 different variables, but it looks at quality of life, it looks at society, it looks at jobs, it looks at the economy and the environment, and all those different aspects, and looks at your city in so many different ways, but makes you think about what should the quality of life be in a city, and how should we deal with all those different aspects, including education and all the other things. So that is rolling out. We were one of 10 beta communities that did that. There's 40 communities now that are participating in the program. So stay tuned. You'll get to see how that works out. But one of the things that we do as mayors, not just in Des Moines, Iowa, but across the platform of mayors at our level of government, we work with each other. We exchange ideas. If Mayor Hartwell has some good ideas, I've got to tell you, we exercise a program called legitimate larceny. I'll steal any ideas that he has. And I hope that he'll do the same with me. And we do that not only between the two of us, but around this country and around the world. Mayors have the ability, without the oversight of other government, to exchange ideas with other mayors. And quite frankly, hopefully, not only push up the interest at the local government level, if you will, from the bottom up in terms of government, to the top levels, to try to figure out ways that we work together and will compare ideas, not only statewide, regionally, nationally, but globally, and try to come up with some of the best ideas that we possibly can have. But I'm going to turn it on over to let you introduce Mayor Hartwell, and hopefully we'll get some good questions. Great. Mayor?
Well, there is this fascinating, intricate dance that happens between local government and national governments, and I've learned in the last 3 days that it's true everywhere in the world. We can't dance alone. We're dance partners because, as Mayor County has said, the implementation of policy happens at the local level. The most urgent and immediate addressing of climate impacts happens at the local level. And yet we need national policy, and we need the support of national governments in order to carry out this work. So in the absence of a national policy, we still have to address the problems, the issues of the impacts of climate change. And that's where the dance becomes a bit awkward, and where we have to go to our national governments and say, we need policy in this area. We need help in this area. I'm so grateful to be part of this collection that President Obama has put together of governors and mayors and tribal leaders from the indigenous peoples of our country, to really wrestle with that interface between national and local government, and how it can become even more lively and meaningful and useful than it is currently. In my little town of Grand Rapids, Michigan, a population 200,000, we're about a decade into our work of sustainability, about a decade into the work of understanding and beginning to develop approaches to the impacts of climate change in our community. And we took what I think is a giant step out of the backwoods of Michigan into the global community when we became, in 2005, as Ms. Allen said in her introduction, very kind introduction, thank you, we became a member of the family of United Nations University Regional Centers for Expertise on Education for Sustainable Development. There are now 111 of us in the world. We are collections of cities and institutions of higher education working together with both the research power of a university and the implementation power of a local community to address climate initiatives. This COP conference is a first for me, and it's been perhaps if it's a first for anybody else in the room, it's been quite an eye-opener to see the way the world works together when it comes to crafting these important and intricate agreements. But I come away, as we come close to the conclusion of this conference, I come away with it with a great sense of hopefulness. Cities have a voice. Cities have been given their voice and their place at the table here, as it were, at COP19, and I think that's both a source of encouragement and pride for us, but it's also ought to be a source of encouragement for you, because we have to find the ways to link the big international agreements, the big national policies, with the boots on the ground that make it happen in cities all over this globe. So thank you for being here today and for participating in this, and I look forward to the questions that you'll have, or maybe even more importantly, the comments that you'll make for us. Thank you.
Yeah, very, very poignant words from Mayor Hartwell here on the end of the first Cities Day at the UNFCCC. We're really encouraged to see the parties here, really starting to embrace the role of cities and subnational governments, and we hope that that's going to continue over the coming months and years. So, for those that may not be familiar, ICLEI is a network of cities and local governments, more than 1,000 around the world, that are dedicated to climate action and sustainability and resilience. Been around for 20 years and have been very active in the UNFCCC proceedings over the years. We think that cities are an essential player towards solving the climate problem. As our speakers have noted, it's where implementation happens, but really decisions around the sources of emissions are held by mayors, whether it's land use regulation, transportation infrastructure, building codes and standards, solid waste facilities, water facilities. All these decisions are made by local leaders. And so on the emissions side, it's so important that they engage with national and international governments around this. Also on the resilience side, obviously these impacts are happening in our communities. They're seen and felt by residents of these communities. And local governments have a responsibility to protect public safety, protect quality of life, and are often, the first responders on the front lines of extreme weather events. So both on mitigation and adaptation, local governments are really central to this. So a lot of cities are doing this on their own. We're seeing best practices bubble up from individual cities, but cities are also stronger together. So it makes a lot of sense for folks to come together in networks like ICLEI to share best practices and to drive a conversation at higher levels of government, to develop partnerships with states, nation states, and the UN. And so, ICLEI exists to build capacity to take these solutions that we're seeing at the local level and scale them up. Start to develop standards, tools, networks that can sort of drive innovation and scale these solutions at different levels. So we're glad that the parties here are seeing the opportunities for collaboration with cities. I think that the United States maybe is seeing them most of all. We've been really encouraged over the past several months by the leadership coming out of Washington, and as well as at the state level. So in the U.S., we've been working closely with the state of California. Michael mentioned they're on track to meet their AB 32 targets, 1990 levels by 2020. And they identified early on that local governments were essential to this. And so the state has partnered with cities, partnered with ICLEI to endorse the protocols for emissions accounting, to support the development of end-to-end cloud-based software tools that cities can use to manage their data from inventories through to climate action plans and then monitoring. And so local governments across the state are utilizing those now. And ICLA USA is then able to leverage that and provide those tools in the next couple of months here to local governments all over the country. So that state level partnership, I think, is a great model that could be replicable in states and provinces, all over the country. At the federal level, we're really encouraged by the president's leadership forming the local and state task force. And then at the international level, encouraged by the U.S. delegation's support for cities here, support for setting up a forum in June of next year at which local governments and other entities will be able to get together and exchange best practices. And we hope that idea carries through into the final text coming out of this meeting. And so, I think there's immense potential to reduce emissions at the local level, but as Mayor Hartwell said, we've got to be doing it as partners. And I think as long as the parties here in the COP are serious about taking action in the short term, cities are happy to join them in that undertaking. So we hope that will be the outcome coming out of Warsaw here. So, thank you.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, hold on. All right, we'll go with this one. And this one is on, okay. All right, we'll just hand this one mic back and forth. Technical challenges. Thank you for the introductory remarks. I have one question, and then maybe we can go to some audience questions. All of you talked about the amazing initiatives that are in process, and that they've been, to a large extent, been in process for quite some time. We're starting to see the benefits of emission reduction measures and resiliency work as it's moved forward. Speaking about resiliency, one of the things that constantly comes up is sustainable funding, sustainable politics that can allow initiatives to continue to move forward, continuity in staff, work products, monitoring. When you think about how you've been able to achieve ongoing progress on climate change, what are some of the things that you think about as the most important pieces of being able to continue making progress on these issues? In California, we're in a unique situation where we have pretty strict term limits, and most of our legislature is not familiar or was not in the legislature when our climate change legislation passed. So we're continually educating new legislatures as they come in, continually educating the public, and then that's been a large part of the continuity in our programs. So can you talk a little bit about how that work is going in your community?
Well, let me just touch on it quickly, and I'll maybe present an aspect that let's talk about a regional sustainability planning work. Certainly when we started out, everybody in our city was very enthused about it because Des Moines had shown some significant progress in a lot of different areas, and it seemed as though we ought to share the love everywhere else. And all of our friends in the suburbs, we invited them to join in. At first, everybody was very excited about it. As we moved through the process and they started looking at, wait a minute, we're going to try to reduce vehicle miles traveled. What does that mean? And we're trying to reduce the cost of transportation so it's not more than the cost of their house in their house payment. What does that mean exactly? And then they start thinking, well, wait a minute, we're sort of developed over the last 40 years, 50 years in some of these suburbs on sprawl. And so we're sort of built on the car, and we're built on gas, and we're built on everything else, and it's been working, and if we stop doing that, what's going to happen to our city? So we've had to have sort of an interesting sales conversation with everybody about nodes and corridors and public transportation and infrastructure and how we share resources and how we plan regionally and how we think about the future for our kids and our grandkids. And what is it that looks like because maybe it doesn't look like those cities that were created in the 1970s. It's sort of a new sense of what living looks like in the United States. So we've had a very interesting conversation, and it got a little bumpy as it got towards the last part of realizing what the plans should look like. And a lot of our friends who, voted 100% in their city councils, and in our particular case, we had 2 counties or 3 counties and 20 different cities sign on to participate in this thing. And they all signed on unanimously at first. And then all of a sudden, when they looked at the final product, we were having a heck of a time getting some of them to sign on at all and getting it a majority vote, let alone a unanimous vote. And we think, wait a minute, you didn't look at what was going on this whole time? So as we think about it, sometimes, there are those that don't think there's a problem. And so we have some educating to do. We have to talk about solutions. We can share those with other municipalities. We have to do it in a number of different ways. We have to do it based upon, sometimes it's a faith-based conversation. Sometimes it's an economic-based conversation. Sometimes it's a renewables conversation about how we can get off some of the fossil fuels and on renewables, where in Iowa it could be wind, it could be geothermal. We're not too deep into the solar issue yet, but nevertheless, we're looking at all the possibilities. So I guess I just share that there are some bumps in the road. In the state of Iowa is contrasted to California. I think you said 500 and some odd different municipalities in the state that are working. Iowa is so much smaller than California in terms of numbers of people. We won't even talk about that. We're a small place. We have 947 different cities and towns and little hamlets, and we have 99 different counties. So we have all these levels of government, and so it is a struggle from time to time to get everybody to buy in, to see the future, and to plan for it. So with that, I'll pass it on to Mayor Hartwell.
Got a little bumpy, did it? Got a little bumpy along the way. Well, Mayor County and I came to office at the same time, but he's obviously a much better salesman than I, because I started out fighting from day one. There wasn't this wonderful rosy feeling about sustainability initiatives, about green energy goals, and so it's. But we've both survived 2 re-election campaigns, and so part of it is consistent leadership, a consistent voice that is willing to say over and over and over again, this is an important vision, this is the way we're headed, come follow me, work with me, and then it's about innovation, and it's about finding new and different ways to approach the problem. So we said we want to achieve a 20% renewable energy goal for municipal power by the year 2008. I said that in 2003. We found an opportunity to change out some great big pumps that pump 51 million gallons of water from Lake Michigan to Grand Rapids to serve our community with water. We changed out these pumps with energy efficient pumps, and we said we're going to grab a hold of the savings that we've accomplished, and we'll invest that savings in the electrical power savings, that is, and cost savings. We'll invest that in our renewable energy portfolio. So we were able, without having to increase anybody's rates, anybody's taxes, to accomplish the goal. You've got to be innovators, and when you look at mayors all over the country, and I'm sure all over the world, there are some amazing innovators out there that are getting things done simply by stepping back and approaching it from a different direction.
Also on this communications question and the question of getting buy-in from the public, I think there are plenty of communities in the U.S. that are bought in around climate mitigation, the need to reduce emissions, and we will continue to make the arguments about cost savings and the fact that most of the strategies that that do reduce community emissions are also saving the municipal government money, they're saving residents and businesses money. We'll continue making the argument about economic development and the opportunities that lie in the clean economy. But in some communities, they're not hearing that. And what they are hearing is the sound of storms in their backyard. They're hearing this theme of resilience is resonating in communities that you might not expect. And so, I think a good starting point in a lot of places that we're seeing is connecting this back to local impacts that folks are feeling in a very tangible way, and even for those that have still haven't embraced climate change in the U.S., they are acknowledging that we're seeing more frequent, more severe extreme weather, and we need to start building more resilient communities. Ultimately, I think that may lead us towards tackling the root of the problem, which is a more cost-effective approach, I guess. But we're seeing communities, coalesce around resilience in droves. We've got a new campaign since June called Resilient Communities for America. And it's asking local leaders to take a pledge to create more resilient communities, to share their success stories in an online platform. And just since June, 115 local officials have signed on. And there are some of the usual suspects that you would expect, some of the bigger coastal cities, but there are small towns. There are Democrats, there are Republicans, there are folks from Texas and California, and this concept and this need to build more resilient communities is pulling folks together, and I think helping to change the conversation a little bit as well.
Okay, should we open it up for questions? Sure. Yep, great. Please raise your hand if you have a question. Introduce yourself, and we'll have a conversation. Online, if you'd like to ask a question, just hashtag #AskUSCenter. Okay, what do you have for me here? 2 there? Let's just take 2 in a row. What do you think? Sound good?
Sounds good.
Okay.
Thank you very much. I'm Patrick, Commander. I work with the Uganda National Roads Authority. I'm also a student of Masters of Science and Management at American Public University. Just last week, we were given some assignments to do on resilient communities and the programs which are being undertaken in the United States. I did a lot of reading until I got tired. Now I started asking myself, how do the communities understand all these programs? The programs seem to be too many. If I buy into one, then another one comes and another one. Where do I stop? Thank you.
Good question. They're giving you the tough ones right off the bat. Okay.
Hi, Alistair Toddy from the UK delegation and Deputy Head of Climate Change Energy in the Foreign Office, formerly British Embassy, Washington. So, having declared my history, I wanted to originally ask what was the one thing you would like subnational organisations, cities, states, provinces to do before Paris in 2015? And Brian, you talked about this possible decision for some sort of forum in June, so I'm very keen to hear more about what that is and what the purpose of that is. But also I'm keen to know from the mayors, what will you be saying to your communities when you get back to Des Moines and Grand Rapids? What will you be saying to them about this international process and its viability, giving that top-down signal which has been lacking for so long?
Great, thank you. Both fantastic questions. From the research standpoint, we understand. Sometimes we feel the same way. We were actually just talking earlier today in a meeting about the number of tools and resources and guides and internet portals that are just popping up all over the place to provide resources and case studies and support for people that want to do climate change planning, both on the emissions and adaptation side and resilience. One of the things we've tried to do in California is endorse certain portals and actually be part of the process for documents that we think are going to have value for our communities. For example, I'm on the advisory committee for the Resilient Communities Initiative that ICLEI is running in the U.S. And I was on the steering committee for the community-wide greenhouse gas protocol, because if we're able to participate in those processes, we acknowledge that they'll respond to our needs in the state. And so by being involved, we know that they're going to apply to our specific situation. And I think this is one of the inherent challenges, is most local governments don't have the resources to be engaged and to participate in so many of these technical efforts. And it's one of the reasons why partnerships are so important, because the state of California has some resources to participate in those efforts, and we can reach out to our local partners and make sure that they're comfortable with the approach we're taking. And so we can serve as a sounding board for some of their concerns and issues. But this problem is not going to go away anytime soon. We will always have too many resources at this point, which I think is a good thing. It can lead to, it can inherently lead to some conflicts, but a preponderance of resources is certainly valuable as we go out and try to tackle this immense problem.
Let me just add one little piece to your question. One of the things when you have so many resources and let's say, for instance, to solve similar problems, at some point or another, we have to try to find the best ones. And especially even when we're looking at comparatives in terms of baselines for greenhouse gas emissions, for instance, and energy usage and whatever, if we're not all on the same platform, it's hard to compare A to B. And so, you know, I think there is some necessity that there should be some consistency nationwide, if not worldwide, so that we know we're all talking about the same thing. So, you know, I would love, by the way, if you want to come to Des Moines, we would work with you. I just want to have a piece of your graduate degree, and so we can share in that, and but be more than happy to work with you. To your question regarding, you know, what do we expect out of this? You know, what happens at these kinds of meetings? Keep in mind that we come from a level of government that there's an expectation of immediate response. So if there's a flood, fix it. If there's a pothole, fix it. If there's a family in need and the house is burning down, put it out and let's do something about it. There isn't putting it off till tomorrow. There isn't something else. And so when we're transparent about some of the planning that Mayor Hartwell and I have talked about that we're in the midst of, just in speaking to that point, we're very transparent in what we're doing and why we're doing it and why we think it'll help. Because if our constituents don't believe in it, it's hard to sell it. Now, in terms of what we're doing here, we're kind of here trying to sell our ability to communicate with the general public to the world, because we deal with them every single day. We deal with the women, we deal with the workers, we deal with business and industry and science and technology and youth and children and all the other levels of folks that are interested in all these things. And they want answers from us today. They're not looking for it 5 years from now or something else. So it's our hope, or at least my hope, that we can come away from gatherings like this with a voice in the room to talk about solutions, immediate, intermediate term, long term, that works for the people, not only in Des Moines, Iowa, but around the world. And we're talking about all the people, not some of the people or part of the people. So the rich ones, the poor ones, the young ones, the old ones, the business owners, the workers, whatever race, creed, wherever they come from. We treat them all equally, and we deal with them on a day-to-day basis. So we're sort of at a local level their voice. We hear some of their concerns. We listen to them daily, but we think that we ought to have input in the process and be part of it and part of the solution. And we think we can be. We can gather momentum, if you will, gather capacity by linking cities together to support a ground-up initiative to move climate issues, resiliency issues, environmental issues forward to future generations.
Ashley, time for a quick response. The problem, of course, with that you've defined can result in paralysis, and so my recommendation always is find the one that works, the low-hanging fruit, the quick one that can give results, implement it, celebrate it, and then move on to the higher order work that lies ahead. Don't be paralyzed by the plethora of problems or opportunities that are in front of you. What do I say to the people in Grand Rapids when I go home about this conference? That I've learned that the language of diplomacy is very obscure. I don't quite get that, and that the timeline of diplomatic initiatives is lengthy. The horizon is distant, and so I can't wait. We can't wait for international agreements to address the issues that we're seeing at home. So we go ahead. We're hopeful. We're optimistic. We're encouraging of these large international processes, but at the same time we're working where we are, addressing the problems as they come before us.
Well, that was just a great way to tie up the conversation. It seems like I don't know if we have time for more questions.
Yeah, I think if anyone has one more burning question, we'll edit.
Oh,
the
yeah.
forum and
Sure.
Great,
Sorry.
great. And then we'll take the one question back there, and I'll ask you to work that in with your closing remarks.
Yeah. I think what we would like to see as ICLEI is local governments and subnational governments engaged fully as governmental stakeholders in the COP process. And what exactly that looks like, I think there's some flexibility, but the last draft of the ADP text that I saw basically offered the idea of a forum for best practice exchange among cities and subnational governments that would be part of the UNFCCC meeting in June in Bonn. And so I think something like that would help to kind of institutionalize and embed a lot of these conversations in the international process. If it's not that, we're going to continue to have our networks and our meetings, and the mayors are going to continue to steal each other's ideas, and we'll move on with international networks one way or another. But we would very much like to support the member states in reaching agreement in 2015. So.
Great. Okay. Final question here.
Thank you so much for the presentations, and I'm glad to hear that there are local leadership on resilience communities, because I was tempted to think that much of the efforts are being put at international level, and when we get back to our respective countries, we are developing national strategies. And I asked myself to say, who is doing local implementation? And I feel this really opens up to really the issues that are happening at the local level, at community level. But I was wondering how this particular program would actually be designed to actually even attract the young leaders in the resilience issues, especially also beyond just the US, like maybe attracting some young leaders from Africa to learn more about how US is conducting the resilience, climate resiliency at grassroots. Thank you.
Bringing us back to the international context. I like it.
That's right. Yeah. I would love to see that. I think a lot of U.S. local governments would like to have more international exchange. I think there are ways that we're innovating in the U.S., but a recognition that U.S. cities don't have all the solutions, and in fact, could use a fresh perspective and from folks coming from a different context. And so I think that city-to-city exchange, with an emphasis on getting diversity in who those stakeholders are, whether they're youth, whether they're women, or business groups or environmental justice organizations. I think there's a place for more of a place for that in the city-to-city exchange. I think it's a great idea. But.
Well, let me direct my remarks primarily to the question of youth and youth engagement. Thank you. I believe that it has, someone with gray hair can say that it's really been the young people, my own children, who've led me when it comes to environmental education. They've been my mentors and guides, and so I think it's important for us as mayors to listen to the voice of youth in our communities, especially around questions of environmental concern and community resiliency. The other thing I would say is that many of us cities, I know that these two cities both have relationships with sister cities in countries around the world, so that we have a sister relationship right here in Poland. We have one in Ghana, in Mexico, in Italy, and in Japan. I ought to be more proactive, and maybe now that I've had this experience, I will be more proactive in reaching out and connecting youth in Grand Rapids to youth in our sister cities. And one final thing, the United Nations University, RCE, that I described earlier, has given us a wonderful context to link youth in secondary schools in countries around the world through what we call virtual conferences. The last one we held was a virtual conference on water. And young people on 3 continents were together in one virtual space for half a day, sharing some of their own learnings and practices around water and water quality and water and invasive species and other water issues. We can make great use of the technology that we have available to us to join these young people in places all over the world. Thank you for the question.
As for Des Moines, I would offer to you that we would love to receive a delegation of young people, of people from your nation, from your city, and we do that periodically, and we talk about best practices. We show them what we're doing. If they have enough time, they can spend time in our departments and do some different things and probably engage with the educational community. But let me just, to your point about developing countries, the future is out there, and hopefully you have a vision, the young people have a vision for they are our future. And to get them the education to know what the right things are to do in terms of environmental things, where do we get our energy? We know what the issues are out there. Science tells us that we've had a huge increase in CO2 in the environment, that is directly related to heat. It's directly related to huge changes in the environment and storm patterns and drought patterns and lots of other things. What I would encourage you to do is let's try to engage those young people to not make the mistakes that the rest of the world has made. So don't go through the winnowing process and start with coal and start with lots of those other things. Let's start with the right thing first. Let's start right in with renewables. Let's do wind, let's do solar, let's do geothermal, let's do hydro. Let's look at all the new technologies that are out there and do it right the first time. Don't make some of the mistakes that the rest of us has made, and let's look at a future that the people of developing countries can celebrate, and along with the rest of us as we all try to move in the right direction.
Thank you. I always like to end a panel discussion with my daughter because she's 2, which means she's going to be 91 years old in 2100. What this means is she's going to be the generation that is dealing with the impacts that we're causing to our climate. So when we think about our youth getting involved and the transformation required in order to achieve our targets and goals, at least in California by 2050, that 80% below 1990 levels, it requires a transformation of how we function. And our children are going to be responsible for that. Our youth is going to be responsible for that. We have a really unique innovation space in California, having Silicon Valley so close. The technology, the data, the availability of really highly skilled young people that can participate in the dialogue about how to move forward on climate policy. And we need that new energy and that extra energy out there that maybe new ideas that we haven't explored yet. It's one of the reasons why the state of California comes to the COP. Exposure to new ideas. California, yes, we're doing a lot on climate change, but there are so many communities out there throughout the rest of the world that are also doing quite a bit. And so it's a learning space for us. And so to acknowledge some of the comments made earlier, COP is a valuable space for us because we get to mix and mingle with our colleagues that are also working on climate, and we're able to learn from that and innovate and move forward. And if we can bring the youth in, that just speeds up that innovation, because things required to achieve our longer term goals, they don't exist yet. And so we need to really work hard with the future generations and our existing generation and really try to achieve our goals as quickly as we can. And we've seen a lot of progress in California as a subnational, and hopefully we'll continue to see that progress moving forward by engaging our youth moving forward. So I want to thank Brian Holland from ICLEI, Mayor Crowley from Des Moines, and Mayor Hartwell from Grand Rapids. It's been a fantastic panel today, and thank you in particular to Chair Sutley for providing introductory remarks, and the U.S. Center for hosting us. Thank you.
Thank you, and a round of applause for our panelists. And in addition to all of the valuable lessons that I've learned about local leadership and taking initiative and building resilience in communities, I also learned that you can only get elected mayor of a green city if you wear a green tie. So you both. Good. Okay, well, thank you so much for coming to the U.S. Center. Thank you to our online audience for joining us. Tomorrow, we have a NASA event here at 11 a.m. In addition to all the wonderful Hyperwall presentations, the NASA event here is on black carbon. We end on an ominous note, black carbon. So thank you, everyone. We really appreciate you coming and joining us, and we hope to see you tomorrow.